Wargaming is doing something interesting at the moment. For a while now, there have been some tanks released as awakened tanks for the Halloween game mode, and where they used to be skin versions of existing tanks, the more recent years have seen some exclusives to the Halloween set. But today we finally have the unskinned XM66F in our hands, and next week the unskinned Pharaoh's Fury is releasing as the Ramses 2. So I think we may be able to expect some more unskins, like a potentially unskinned Night Stalker. But luckily with these unskinned versions of these tanks, they are different enough, so maybe that unskinned Night Stalker won't be so overpowered. But regardless, today we are talking about the XM66F and its interesting differences to the Roswell. Of course, the caliber of the gun is the same at 120mm, but immediately we get to one of the key differences between this tank and the Roswell, because the XM66F here actually has the old 400 alpha damage. In fact, this version of the tank is identical to PC's version, which means it doesn't have the nerfed DPM of the Roswell, with this tank's 9.5 second reload value giving it a DPM of 2528. This is interesting for two reasons. The first being, even when the Roswell had 400 alpha, its reload was nerfed by 0.8 seconds, but then it was changed to 420 and the reload was increased further to compensate. And that's the other interesting bit, is that this version of the XM is bringing back the 400 alpha American 120mm, despite those going extinct a few patches ago. Even tanks like the T28 prototype and the T28 itself, as tier 8s, are 420 alpha damage. So I wonder why we decided to reintroduce something we killed not that long ago. Moving on from that odd aspect of this tank's release, we get to the shells, which are identical to the Roswell with its mediocre for tank destroyer pen, with its standard AP rounds at 236mm of pen and 1067 shell speed, and its premium APCR rounds with 276mm of pen and 1240 shell speed. Even the HE Alpha is different, by the way, between the Roswell at 530 and the XM at 515, but both do have the same 60mm of penetration. These rounds, of course, aren't anything special, and are really subpar for 120mm at tier 8. The Tech Tree 120mm have 10 to 20 more millimeters of pen, and something like a TS5 has the same DPM but with better pen and alpha. But the TS5 has some pretty poor accuracy, whereas this tank has a nice 0.38 base accuracy value and a 2-second aim time. This tank also has it beat in gun depression with its great 10 degrees of gun depression, helping it to work ridges super well. And although this tank may have a turret, it's super limited for whatever reason. It has a clear big bump in the back that would make sense to limit the turret from rotating, but it doesn't even get close to that engine deck with its 30-degree limit to the left and right. These limits aren't terrible in comparison to many case-mated tanks, of course, but it's just odd on this tank because it looks like it can turn so much more. So sometimes I find myself pulling up to a corner or a ridge at an angle thinking I can peek a shot with the turret turned, only to find out and remember that the turret is very limited. You do have enough gun rotation to still sidescrape though, but sadly you don't have the armor for it. With only 50mm behind the 20mm tracks, you can easily be penned by standard rounds when trying to sidescrape. Trying to make the angle of the side armor tight enough to auto ricochet just means you give up your lower plate when you peek to fire yourself. So it's not terrible because 50mm does mean to overmatch you'd have to go against a 152mm gun or higher. So optimally you might have to risk the trade to make the side armor work at a tight angle, but it's not just giving up the lower plate you would have to worry about because the turret has two cupolas, one on either side, that poke around the corner before your gun does. So they could still get a pen off when side scraping well enough just from the cupolas that are only 100mm thick. The hull armor on this tank is not very good, with its lower plate at 100mm thick and its upper at a weaker but more well-angled 95mm thick. These angles though are not enough to protect you on flats from standard tier 8 rounds. So with this tank you of course want to make sure you use that 10 degrees of gun depression. When using that depression you make the shallow cupolas that much harder to hit, and you utilize your well-rounded turret and strong gun mount armor. There's still a spot you have to worry about though, and that's these 230mm struts that become flatter to the enemy when using your gun depression and become susceptible to premium rounds. It's really not that bad however, as I'm not sure many people know they can even shoot it there, at least not yet. But if you overpeak and give up your upper plate, even though you're using gun depression to make its angle better, your upper plate is still pennable with standard rounds, so be careful not to overpeak your ridges as you give up an easy to pen shot through that upper plate. Overall though, the armor does hold up well enough to allow for a semi-aggressive playstyle that doesn't force you to sit in the back of the map for opportunities. You can make your own opportunities with this tank and have reliable enough armor to do so, as well as being able to take a few hits with your above average 1300 HP. But you can't make those plays very fast. You only go 35 kilometers an hour forward, which isn't the slowest American tank destroyer of course, but it's no speed demon either. And here too is one of the biggest differences between this tank and the Roswell. This tank lacks the Roswell's speed mode. The turbo mode on the Roswell allows it to go 45 kilometers, but surprisingly the XM66F here has better horsepower at 850, giving it a better power to weight ratio and quite a good one too at 15.45. And honestly, I prefer the XM over the Roswell in terms of speed. Switching to turbo mode takes time, and then you still have to get up to speed and then switch back off to get your accuracy back. All that time switching could be better spent just driving there and potentially hitting shots on the move as well, without the turbo mode dispersion penalties. I rarely ever used the turbo mode on the Roswell, because its speed increase was not enough to make it efficient to use unless in edge case scenarios where the remaining enemies are on the complete opposite side of the map. I'd take the better horsepower and base power to weight ratio over having to utilize turbo mode to get to where I want to go. Plus, if you want to get somewhere all sneaky like, turbo mode actually screws you over there too. Not that your camo is great to begin with, but why make it worse for so little benefit? The XM and the Roswell share the same spotting capabilities with 380 meters view range and 387 moving and 347 still concealment values. This is pretty decent given that it's a tank destroyer. The 380 meters view range is slightly above average for tier 8 tank destroyers, so it's nice to have. Having that armor too helps for when you do get spotted, and by allowing you to be more aggressive, you don't really have to worry about the camo when you brawl. So, the XM66F. Quite an unexpected release to be honest. This sets a precedent too for future Halloween unskins that may come out in the next couple weeks, and we shall see how that turns out. As for this tank, you can get it for gold, silver, or free XP, and I presume that's how all of these will roll out, as the next week's tank is doing the same. However, they are only around for 1 week, so pay attention to the news. If you're watching this, you have till Monday night to get this tank. If you have the Roswell, do I recommend picking this up for gold? Probably not. What about silver? Well, if you have enough surplus silver, well then of course pick the tank up. And then there's the free XP option, which I got mine for free XP, and I'd say it's worth it. I think this tank is an upgrade from the Roswell, as you get better DPM and horsepower, and drop the, what I felt was useless, speed mode. Not to mention, by going through free XP, if you don't have enough free XP, it's actually cheaper to convert than it is to buy the gold. I still think it's odd we brought back the 400 Alpha American 120mm though, but maybe it was just easier to carbon copy PC stats rather than change it up to fit our tropes in our game now, right? The XM66F is a solid tank that gives you an in-between feel of the T28 and T30. It feels like a much better T28 prototype, even if you don't get a lot of turret rotation. You got better speeds and gun depression than the case-banded American TDs, but you're not as insane as something like a Panzerjäger. It's just a solid and enjoyable in-between tank that is better than its skinned counterpart for once. And before we get into the gameplay for you, let's go over my loadout. It's a pretty standard loadout with optics, gun rammer, and vents. You could go speed equipment if you're one of those players, or choose camo net over optics if you prefer to try and snipe. But seeing as it has decent enough view range and the playstyle of the tank, I chose optics over a camo net. As for the consumables, we have a premium repair kit, food rations, and a premium med kit. And our commander is rocking 6th Sense, rapid loading, steady aim, situational awareness, snapshot, horn leader, run and gun, camo expertise, and silent driving. Now let's get into the one game I have to show you guys. And here is that one game. Now, I only played this tank one day, and this was the best game that I got. Pretty early on, it was doing very well, and I want to spoil it, but I'll just save it for. I'll let you guys see what kind of mastery badge we get out of this one. Immediately, there's a T28 to my right, so competition with my tech tree brother, but it feels very weird having 400 alpha damage back on an American tank destroyer. What was great about this tank, though, is I noticed so many high rolls, very high rolls as well, almost 500 high rolls while playing this vehicle. And that I thought was quite interesting. It would be funny, and I'm not saying this is the case, but just purely from the anecdote that I just stated, it would be funny if this was 420 alpha, just not labeled as 420 alpha. But the DPM increase isn't insanely high in comparison to the Roswell. So although I do prefer this tank for its DPM and its speed capabilities, not needing turbo mode, having that 15 power to weight, which is the magic number for me, it didn't really feel like it had that much more DPM. And I'm pretty sure like the base values, it's like just under 200 more DPM. And then hitting for 20 less alpha damage, it's like, okay, it's a give and take. That was a nice shot on the 110's cupola, wasn't it? So we're already pushing forward on this side of the map because they had one tank here. We've done 1,000 damage so far, and now we want to cut through their spawn to be able to do some damage. I don't know if they're ever going to bring back 420, or not 420, but 400 Alpha Americans, but I feel like they should do a big revert. It's a video I've been wanting to make for a long time as well, but might as well slap in this conversation here while it's relevant. I don't really think the Americans deserved 420. It doesn't really like fit them, especially after we gave the Leopard 1 420 first. It kind of denoted 420 as maybe a alpha damage for unique vehicles. We have permatracked and killed this round panzer while unspotted. That was pretty good. 2,800 damage now and picked up 3 kills. It's 13 to 10 and they're pressuring the cap. So what do? Well, we flank. We flank. There is that, if you guys have seen the Vikings teaser from their season trailer, there is that Lot Stridsverdon 120mm, a tier 9 Swedish tank destroyer premium that on PC has 420 alpha damage. So like, it's an alpha that you would think would have been utilized as sort of a unique identifier for certain vehicles, you know what I mean? And the MBTB had it as well, as sort of a specialty. But then when we buffed all the Americans, we made the MBTB 430. So I guess in order to make that more special, we made it the only 430 alpha tank in the game, to my knowledge. Anyway, the Roswell, I do think, is worse than this tank. Purely because it's the same armor, but you're getting 200, almost 200 more DPM out of this gun. 20 more alpha damage isn't significant enough for you to be like, oh, it's better. Where when comparing something like a Chieftain to a Valor worth 40 more alpha damage, that's much more significant. Do I wish this was 420? Just to keep up the pace? Because when I say they're extinct, I'm pretty sure they were extinct before this tank came out. We got lucky that penned, by the way. There are other 120mm that are American that don't do 420, but that's because they do 360, like the T77 and the TL7 Black. But all 400s, I'm pretty sure, were converted to 420. So as I've reiterated multiple times in this video, I think it's very odd that we have reintroduced it back with an unskinned version of a tank that already exists in the game. Now, we've done 5,000 damage, as you see, but unfortunately, the game was kind of a rushed game. It's not even, it's just over 4 minutes left in the match, or gone through the match. And this whole time we were just eating. We were about to go and flank these guys, but my team, instead of pushing off the cap and coming around to flank me, decided to also go up the 3 line where we already have people. So I ended up flanking by myself in the BZ platoon, realized that, turned around, left my team. The team doesn't push until they're spotted back on my body, and like, I kind of got screwed there from a team that couldn't read the map, and from a smart BZ platoon that realized at least someone was about to flank them, and they were gonna go and take me out by myself. But we did 5,600 damage, and I was expecting this to be an ace game. You know, doing 5,600 damage in a tier 8, and however many kills we got. 5, sorry. Just looking at my platoon mate who's still alive. But 5 kills, almost had a top gun. If we got the top gun, this maybe would have been an ace, which By me saying that, you could tell 1922 base XP is not an ace tanker. It probably will be in a couple of weeks, but as this was day 2 of the tank being out, it was not an ace. But like I said, if you have the Roswell, you don't really need it, but if you have the silver, get it, right? If you don't have the Roswell, this is better than the Roswell, so enjoy it while it's here. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.